Lighthouse Church. Welcome to the Lighthouse ShapeCast, where we hear from Jesus, we talk about Jesus, and we just have authentic conversation. We're here with Joyce today, who is an amazing, amazing woman in our community. She's the executive director for community ministry, which is a ministry that we support here at the church, but she's also just a phenomenal wife and a mom and just a community leader and a family member of Lighthouse Church. And she depicts a life of service in a way that's really beautiful and really humble. And I've learned a lot from the way that she serves our city, and I hope that you guys will glean a lot of her heart and her love for Jesus from today. And in particular, the reason why we really wanted to bring Joyce in light of everything going on, is that there's a lot happening in our city and in our nation that is worthy of lamenting and mourning and being rightfully angry. And we want you guys to do those things well and to pray through those things. But we also want you to see that God is using people all over the city to do good work, and CM, community ministry, and Joyce in particular doing those things. And so I want this to be a ShapeCast that encourages you and gives you guys hope that there are powerful people moving in action on behalf of Jesus Christ in our city, and that we can join in, understand what's happening, and also be able to play a role. And we believe that Jesus is a man of peace. His kingdom is one of peace and also of action. And so I hope that this ShapeCast particularly encourages you and challenges you in that, and just gives you kind of a breath of fresh air in light of everything that's happening in our world. So I want to say thank you for coming and taking the time out of your very busy schedule as an executive director to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. One of the things that we always like to start out with here on the ShapeCast is talking about how God is particularly speaking to you and shaping you right now, because we can talk a lot about discipleship or service or acts that we were doing in our life, but those things don't really have a deep meaning unless we have a rooted relationship with Jesus. And I know you do. And so I'd love for you to just share a little bit about how God is shaping you right now.
Well, so one of the things you can know about me is that I'm an auditory learner.
Okay.
And so I tend to listen to a lot of books on tape, and my kids actually put me on to a podcast series by Tim Mackey called Exploring My Strange Bible.
Okay.
And he does a lot of the historical narrative that goes along with the Bible scriptures like Josh does. Mm-hmm. But what's really cool is he has 150 podcasts, and you get so hooked on the series of whatever he's talking about that you just keep listening and listening. And I think I listened to all 150 within a week or two. That's awesome. But what happened was that after each one, I was like, wait a minute, I want to understand more about what he just said. Who just said that? Why did he say that? Where did he get that from? And so that has been really interesting for me because I feel like I want to know more. And so now I find myself reading all the notes, at the end, where they have the little A by the verse in the Bible.
Asterisk.
And I want to kind of read down. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Instead of just reading, just to read, I want to read and understand.
Very cool.
And one of the things that's happening at our house is that our daughter and son-in-law are moving in.
Right.
From
Kansas, right? They're coming from Kansas
to go to seminary. And
which is awesome.
So then I will have an in-house, I can ask this person these questions now.
What are you paying for in your school that you could just share with me?
Yeah. So that if I have a question, I can say, Darren, what does this mean? Because I know that he and my daughter, Karina, they were profoundly impacted in their faith journey by this particular speaker, and just the style. They're like, why aren't we preaching this way in our churches all the time?
Yeah.
I know Josh does that a lot, goes deep into the historical and does more of a narrative style. And that's what this is.
Very
only I
cool.
can listen to it anywhere, anytime, not wait for Sunday.
Yeah. How has, I think it's really interesting because we've been talking a lot, just as we've been trying to shape, I think, the discipleship of our church and the young Christians in our church to be able to engage with scripture in that way, where it's not just checking something off of a list, but it is narrative and it's very in-depth, but also that there's a level of discipleship where you get to hungering for deeper knowledge. And can you share a little bit maybe about just your journey with your faith in general, of when you came to a point in your faith where you really wanted to learn more? Has that ebbed and flowed? Has that been set times in your life? Yeah,
it's kind of ebbed and flowed through the years. Usually it's in a time of trial and tribulation that you find yourself really seeking more and saying, I need to really believe more or have more faith that God's going to take care of this. One of the more recent examples was when community ministry had to buy the building. And the journey that started almost a year ago at this time to raise $800,000, it's like, this is impossible. And yet one of my volunteers kept saying, God's got this, God's got this. Joyce, don't worry about it. God's always taking care of community ministry, and the faith that it took to do that, and then that we were able to close on the building and actually have the purchase done by February 27,
Praise
which
God,
was
before all this happened, right?
A week or two before this whole thing happened. That was definitely a faith journey. I mean, there's been many along the way because I'm kind of older, but that was probably the most recent one.
Yeah, well, and I love that. That's just a reality, that when we face trial and battle and difficulty, that it can either one of two things. It either shoves us far, far from God and we run, or it pushes us towards that faith, which is really cool. So you feel like you're kind of in that season right now, or does it feel different?
It's different right now. I don't feel like I'm having a trial and tribulation. Okay. It's just whatever, whatever day this is, we just keep going on kind of thing. Cool. Because I have been at work every single day during the COVID crisis, it's not like my routine has changed at all. Okay. It's just the way we deliver our services has shifted.
Yeah, that makes sense. When did you become a believer? I actually don't know.
Oh, when I was a little kid.
Okay, so you grew up in the church, right? Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in the church, and then I got baptized probably when I was 10, 11, 12. Okay. I think my real spiritual awakening to that I was called to be different was in high school. Okay. Because I found myself slipping into behaviors that my peers had. And when I used some language that I shouldn't have to my father.
Oh, no.
And felt the repercussions of that. Then I was like, wait, how am I any different from anybody else? I mean, there's nothing to set me apart. And I say that I'm a Christian and I'm active in youth group, but here I am using profanity, basically, to my father when I didn't get my way about something. And he was right and I was wrong. But, still it was, that was kind of a really awakening, what am I doing?
Yeah. Cool. And then from there, you kind of decided to dive a little bit deeper into your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome. And was that in Denver? Are you?
Oh, yeah. I'm from...
You're one of the natives?
I was born in Kansas.
Okay.
Kansas. But I grew up here in Denver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Life. That's awesome. Well, one of the things that I think stands out for me when it comes to discipleship and just kind of my faith journey with Lighthouse is the practice of just really spending time listening to Jesus and listening to the heart of God in any season that we're in. And so in the season that you're in right now, where you're diving into deeper knowledge, how do you feel like you're hearing from God in that? Do you have a sense of what God is trying to speak to you or challenge you in specifically?
I don't think so. Not anything specific. It's just so general, that it's just there. Yeah. That God is there with me and will help me through this time. I don't know that there's any
aha.
Yeah, there's no big ahas for me right now.
No, that's good.
What about you?
Thank you for asking, for sharing, and then asking. I love that. I am in a simpler season, I think, in my faith. I was kind of going through, as I was reading through one of the Gospels, I was having a lot of aha moments of who Jesus is and what his character is. And then I've kind of slowed down and I've been back in the Old Testament, and Ethan and I have been reading through the Psalms a lot. And I've just found a lot of comfort in some of the Psalms of Lament. And in particular, I was reading Psalm 17 this week. And this one was a psalm of vindication. David was asking for God to vindicate evil. And I used to hate those Psalms. I used to think that David was so wrong. And and I think that in a lot of ways reveals my own privilege that I didn't have anything to ask God to vindicate in my life. And I used to be super frustrated, but now with everything happening and just dear friends of mine that are really hurt and just the world being incredibly broken at this point, I was reading the Psalm of vindication and really grateful that David gives an example of really deep emotion, but also a rightful placement of it. He doesn't always give a good example of that, but in this Psalm 17, he rightfully asks Jesus to be the one vindicating evil, not himself. And so when I sat down with the Lord on it, and just asked him to speak because I didn't really know where to go from that, he reminded me of Micah 6. And so he said something along the lines of, vindication is mine, and your call is to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly in this season. And so that's kind of been the heart check for me right now, with just a broken heart for the many things that are going on, but also an eagerness and a hunger for what God's going to do in light of it, and expecting God to move and having faith for that. And then having some days where I don't have a lot of faith in that, where the call right now, what I'm trying to just kind of speak over myself and be reminded of from Micah 6 is, be just, act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. So that's kind of where I'm leaning into and trying to, and see how God uses that, in my small spheres. So that's where I am at in this season. And I think God speaks and moves and grows us in so many different seasons, but we also have this long journey, and you can look back over your life and you can kind of have a holistic view of what God's done in your life. And I know that that's been on your heart to share. And so I really want to ask you kind of a holistic question, and then allow you to go wherever you would like to. But essentially, I want to know what has God done in your life to bring you to the place that you are as somebody who's so active in service, so devoted to meeting needs in our community? And how have you seen God just show up in that process?
Okay. So I want to share a story with you about a journey that we have been on for many, many years. And it started back when Phil and I had been married probably 3 or 4 years. Okay. And he wanted to start his own company with a friend of his from college. And so at the time I was working on a master's degree in speech language pathology, and
we made it.
and he came home and he said, you need to go get a job so that, we have a steady income while we do this new startup. And at the time I was kind of resentful, but, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Because this was, I didn't want to squelch his dream of starting his own company. I mean, we were young, and, everything was a possibility for us. Right. And I didn't want to have to look back years later and say, I wish we would have. Yeah. So that was a part of the thought process in that. And so I went to an employment agency, and they said, well, we have a job working in pediatric ophthalmology. Really? I didn't even know what that was. Yeah. I didn't even know how to spell it, ophthalmology, and there's an H in there somewhere or two. But so I went and I applied for this job, and it basically was working for a pediatric eye doctor. Okay. And my background was music education. That's what I graduated from college in. And then this speech pathology thing started. And so it's like I had no skills for this job working for a doctor, but he was very nice. And he said, I'll just train you. Cool. And I ended up working in that field for 16 years.
Did you really? I didn't know that.
In pediatric ophthalmology, torturing children with eye drops and things like that. It was fun. So I learned all about different kinds of eye diseases and things that happen to kids. And then we moved to Denver, and the doctor that I'd worked for in Kansas decided that he would move to Denver too, a couple years after that. Very cool. But in between there, I had our daughter Karina. Okay. And of course, she was the perfect baby, except that she had a white kind of splotch on her forehead, and then this white hair growing out of it. Oh, really? Which looked really cool. Yeah. Didn't think anything about it. And then our second son, Andy, was born here in Denver. And we noticed that he was really super light sensitive and that his eyes crossed a little bit. And so when we were in Kansas, this was before the doctor moved here. Okay. I made an eye appointment for him, and lo and behold, Andy had ocular albinism. So it's, like when albinism, you usually think of people that are all white with pink eyes and white hair. Right. But his was only confined to his eyes. Interesting. And so that meant that he was going to grow up as a kid with low vision and related, things related to not being able to see very well. And because I had a background in that, it was I knew right where to take him and right what kind of services he would need. And so it wasn't it was super traumatic for me personally. For the grandparents, of course it was, because they want the perfect grandchildren. But, we had Andy, and he's awesome. But so when we got here, after he was diagnosed, we put him at Anchor Center for the Blind, and they worked with him for a long time. And then we went for genetic counseling and found out that we had a recessive gene that Phil and I both carried. And who knew, that we had that? We didn't know. Yeah, right. So, but they said there's only a 1 in 4 chance of this occurring again. So we said, okay, well, we don't want just 2 kids. We wanted 3 kids. So then we had Brian. And Brian also has ocular albinism, much more severe than Andy. Okay. So he has the jiggly eyes, and stuff, and his low vision. And I don't really ever think about it when I'm with them because I'm so used to it.
Right.
And except like when you're at McDonald's and you're trying to read the sign, to tell what the meal is, and he says to you, "What does it say up there? What are my options?" And then you're like, "Oh,
I
yeah,
forgot. Right.
Oh yeah."
Right.
So, and the reason I wanted to share that story is because before we had children, God put me in this job in pediatric ophthalmology because he knew I was going to have children that would have eye problems.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like that Psalms 139, before you were made, I knew you, and God knew that he would need to prepare me before I even had these children to deal with these kind of children that had this problem.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
They've both grown up and are productive, independent children. I mean, I guess they still are children, even if they're in their mid to late 20s.
You get to call them that for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, and they're independent and they didn't let like Brian always said, he says, "I'm not going to let my disability define me." And he didn't, and he doesn't, and so he's a successful computer engineer living in Idaho. So,
Heck yeah.
But I want to share that with you because, here we are in this weird time with COVID-19, people losing their jobs, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Maybe afraid to try something new. There I was out there not knowing anything, even how to spell this career that I would get put into.
For so many
years. And yet
years.
God used it in such a neat way to prepare me to be the right parent for these children at that time.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage people not to be afraid. Don't be afraid of these weird circumstances. Don't be afraid to try something new and different that you don't think you're qualified for, because I sure was not qualified to do that job.
Yeah.
And yet I worked in it for 16 years and became a technician and
So
really
cool.
enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite careers.
I love that. Well, and I just love your ability to say, because really working in the disability field prior to working in ministry, I know the battle of parents when they find out about a disability with their kiddos and just that, there's an emotional process that happens. And I don't know if it was immediate for you, but for you to look back and say, wait, God has prepared me for this in particular situation is really cool to see, like your immediacy of faith, to be able to look back and see that and that he did prepare you very intimately for something like that.
Very, very well for that, so that there was no big surprise. It's like, oh, this is what it is. Yeah. Okay, let's deal with it. If it would have been something different, that I wouldn't have been prepared for, then it would have been much more frightening.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Wow, very cool. So what then so you were then working in that field for 16 years, and then what happened after that? I am learning so much about you. I just have you as like the CM queen, so I love hearing the backstory.
So I actually started then in community ministry 20 years ago.
Okay.
And it was when my kids hit middle school. Okay. A lot of parents, when their kids hit middle school, they're like, yay, I can be free. I can go back to work now. For me, middle school is just the weirdest time for kids, and that parents need to be present.
Yeah, it's
in
an
their
awkward
lives. And
stage.
so that's when I quit working in ophthalmology, and I can't sit still very well. So when I wasn't needed to help out at school, I wasn't like a helicopter parent, but I was available.
Yeah,
so that if something needed to be done, I could be there. And if their friends wanted to come over for lunch from school or whatever, then they always felt like they could bring their friends home to some place. So I started volunteering at community ministry, and that was back in 2000.
Okay.
And community ministry at the time was looking for a place to move to. They had offices at 3 different churches.
Oh, okay.
And so they were looking for a central location, and the church, the gym building at Garden Park Church was sitting empty then because Head Start had moved out. And so I said, we have this building here, maybe we could make it work and bring it all into in-house, into one location. And so that's when I started working there. I was on the board of trustees at the church. And so we had a partnership with community ministry. And so then through the years, I was a volunteer at the clothing bank, and then I was on the board of directors, and then suddenly I was the board president. Next thing you know, I was the interim executive director because we had to fire the previous executive director.
Oh, no, I didn't know
I was the board president. We had to do that, which was probably one of the more awkward situations I've had to be in.
I can imagine.
So then they said, well, can you just stay on as executive director? And I'm like, Sure. So that was 12 years ago that I've been the executive director there.
That is a long time of service. And I love that it starts with volunteering. And then like you saw a vision, and you're just a woman with a vision. Like you saw a vision of what CM could be and how it could look, and you just ran with that and chased that. And that is so much of how I think people see you now. For those that don't know what community ministry does, I would love for you to just kind of give like a backdrop of the purpose and the heartbeat of CM, and then what really drew you to volunteering in the first place. Like, what was that prompting process?
So community ministry has actually been around for 52 years, and their mission is to provide for basic needs of people that are struggling economically. And so we do that by having a food pantry, children's clothing, utility assistance. When we're not in COVID-19 season, then we actually have medical clinics that come in to do health screenings. We have cooking classes.
Once a month? Is that every other week on a typical?
The cooking classes are usually 6-week stint. That go we start them about every other month, so we do them 4 or 5 times a year. The medical clinic would come in every other week. We had a counselor that would come in the opposite weeks of the medical clinic. Clothing bank was every week. Food bank, the food pantry part is open every day, Monday through Thursday, and then also on Wednesday evenings. So, basically we decided that the core values, the core things we needed to do was just basic needs. We didn't need to be social workers to the world. We just want to help people through the rough patches in their lives. And so that was the vision 52 years ago. It started out with one church, Brentwood United Methodist. The women there, I think women have a lot of power, and those women had a lot of power.
Awesome.
And then they partnered with nuns at Loretta Heights.
I love it.
And then from there, they grew from 8 churches to now we have 27 partner congregations from 15 different denominations. So it's very ecumenical. Which for me was kind of an adjustment, from growing up in one faith denomination, Mennonite Brethren, and then trying to understand how all these other people perceive how God does church and community and service and all that stuff. So that's been really fun. I mean, that's probably been one of the more fun parts of my job is getting to know people from other churches and, where they kind of stand. And yet, our common thing that bonds us together at Community Ministries is knowing that people all have a need. And right now, a big emphasis is that they need to eat, because if you don't eat, your brain gets wacko. And, and then you just can't even think. Like the kids at school, they have the breakfast before the bell programs when they had school going on, so that kids would start out the day not hungry. And so that was really important, because when you're hungry, that's all you think about is being hungry.
Focus on,
and then you can't think, well, how am I going to get a job, or how am I going to pay my rent, or my car payment, or my insurance, because all you can think about is, I am so hungry. What am I going to do? So that's where we're kind of right now, our total focus is primarily on just making sure that people have something to eat right now, because what we give out probably is about $300 to $400 worth of groceries when per family when they come in. And if you think about, if you had $300 or $400 that suddenly you could spend because you're not spending it on groceries, then you could pay off, part of your Excel bill, or part of your rent, or part of your insurance, or, so that they know that you have good faith and that you don't go into collections. That's really important, because collections, once they start calling you, then it's just like you're dragged under. So
well, and you're working with, because you talked a lot about all the churches that you guys are partnering with. That's all across Denver Metro, right? Because you guys you serve a wide amount of area codes for the most part,
And
right now,
we're serving everybody. Usually we serve 5 zip codes in the Southwest Denver area, from Colfax and Broadway and all Southwest. But right now, if someone comes, it doesn't matter who they are, where they live, we will give them food.
That's awesome.
And we've been really abundantly blessed with food. Even more now than we were before the COVID crisis.
Praise God, that's so
because some of the food pantries have had to close because they cannot figure out a functional service model to keep the social distancing thing, and yet to keep things sterilized and sanitized all the way along. But we have figured it out. So, we're open, and we're open our regular hours.
Yeah, which is awesome. And you guys have gone nonstop, probably all the more work for most companies staying open during this season. It's additional effort put in. But you've also, you guys can receive emails from CM to see kind of what's happening and how they're serving the community and how you guys can partner. And we'll talk about that at the end. But one of the big things that stood out to me is you guys have nearly doubled in who you're serving.
Yeah, I was looking up some numbers before I came. So
tell us, just kind of give us the examples of how it's shifted since COVID.
So in 2019, between January and May, we saw 761 families consisting of 1,953 people.
Okay.
This year, between January and May, it's 1,135 families consisting of 3,284 people.
Holy cow.
I mean, it is totally doubling.
Yeah.
And it hasn't slowed down. And even at the beginning of January, we were already running a little bit higher than last year's numbers.
Okay.
But our biggest day of numbers was on the day they announced the stay-at-home order in March.
Yeah.
And we saw so many people that day that, I mean, it was kind of like God must have been producing food back in our walk-in, because we didn't run out of food.
Praise
and everybody
God.
went home with food.
Yeah.
And since then, because of the different places that have had to close, we have an abundance of food. And it's like, okay, we don't have enough walk-in right now for all this food.
Yeah, I know.
that we
Joyce,
have.
you were just telling me today as she was coming in, she was like, we had a great amount of food. And at this point today, not as many people who needed it. But you guys are ready for the high needs of the city, which is huge. And I love that you guys are not, even though you started out saying, hey, we're not going to be a superhero to all people, like we can't do all things. But over time, you guys have definitely added the fact that you guys include a counseling service is huge. So what were some of maybe those learning curves that you've gained from working with populations in need that cause you to see that there are more ways to continue serving and to be creative in your service?
Well, usually when you have one problem like food, that's a problem, but there's always a lot of other problems that go with it. There's always other things that happen, and there's a reason that that's a problem. Like one of the ladies, I remember she came in because her husband had an injury at work. Okay. So then he was denied workman's comp for some reason. I don't know what the deal was, but it caused him to have a total mental breakdown. So her main issue was that her husband was like in mental breakdown mode. Yeah. And she didn't know how to deal with that and work and keep food on the table. So there's always, it's not just one issue. Like food is one issue, but usually there's like a lot of other issues going on in the home. And when we had our pantry as self-choice,
which describe that a little bit for people who don't typically know.
Our food pantry is set up like a little grocery store. So people would go around with a volunteer and they could choose what food they would like to eat. Okay. And so then they weren't being sent home like they didn't like green beans, and yet we sent them home with green beans. They had the option to opt out.
And there's like an independence component. And that's just honor. It's an honor piece too.
Yeah, and and then it doesn't feel like it's so degrading.
Like
I'm handing you this because this is what I think you want. Which unfortunately right now that's the mode we're in. But so then the volunteers, they were really good about finding out what other needs do you have. And then either referring them to things that we had going on in-house as collaborations or to other agencies that we partner with. Like if they needed a job, then we would send them to Mikasa for job training. If they need legal services, again, Mikasa has free legal services, things like that. Cool. So, there's always these partnerships all over the place, that you can utilize when you actually talk to people.
Right.
Because, food is a basic need. And so a lot of, when you talk about things, you talk around them, about the table, around the table. It's just part of life. You share
culture.
Yeah. So, maybe that's part of the reason why so many struggle with the COVID thing and being stayed at home, because they were used to that fellowship around the table.
Absolutely.
And now they don't have that. Whether I get fellowshipped every day because I'm around food all the time.
Yeah. Call it good.
That's not a problem right now. Yeah.
That's so awesome. So I love kind of you sharing the original heartbeat of CM, which was to just level the playing field in a lot of ways too, that everybody has need, that you guys can creatively and intentionally provide need for what you guys are available, what you have at your fingertips, and also connections across the city. So how would you say that the vision of CM for Denver matches or partners with the vision that Jesus has for Denver? How do you see your work coming up against and working alongside the gospel in our city?
So when I look back at our bylaws, one of the scriptures that we referenced in our bylaws was Matthew 25,
Okay.
where they separate the sheep from the goats, and it's the story about, when did I see you hungry? When did I see you needy? When did I see you thirsty? When did I see you in jail? And Jesus, if you did this for the least of these, you've done it for me.
Yeah.
And so in that way, we're just carrying out what Jesus thought was important. It was important to recognize that people have needs, and not everybody is coming from a position of wealth or privilege, and so for us, we are a conduit for that. When I talk to pastors of churches, I said, you guys can provide spiritual food for these people, but we really have the capacity to provide physical needs for these people so that you don't have to necessarily have a pantry at your church. Just send them to us and we will take care of physical if you take care of spiritual.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And it's so important that there's both and.
Right.
So important, because especially in this season, I am a person of prayer and I believe wholeheartedly in the power of prayer. But I also believe that God has called us to provide what we can provide and to meet need, and that it is both praying on our knees, but also using our hands to physically provide, what we are able.
I think one of the things that's been the hardest for our volunteers is that they were so used to the close connection they had with the families. And they've really missed that, because we get government resources, we're not supposed to proselytize or, advertise that we are a Christian, faith-based organization. But if someone was weeping in your chair next to you, you can offer to pray for them. And they can either accept it or reject it.
Right.
And some of my people are very powerful people of prayer, and they would take that time to pray with someone, because although you can't always see the immediate result. Sometimes it's just the comfort of knowing that someone cares enough about you to take you a little bit on a bit of a faith journey, knowing that their prayers will be interceded for.
Absolutely. I think that's huge. And I love, you have really cool volunteers from all across your churches, but also from people who have been served first, even some of your staff members first came to CM because they were in need, and then have transitioned into providing for those that are in need when they were able to get back up on their feet, which I think looks so much like the kingdom of God, that when we are served and we receive grace and mercy and goodness, then we want to pour that out. So I think that's just another beautiful way that your community embodies the gospel and really sets a strong example. Like you guys said, a really strong example for people who are just willing to give what they have, whether that's a few hours a week or if that's donations of food or prayer even on the back end, that you have people that are saying, I have received this compassion and goodness, and now I'm full of it. I remember when we went to the Caring by Candlelight event, which so last year the Caring by Candlelight event is it's all women's event.
It's all women.
Yeah, which is this fundraiser that CM does, and some Lighthouse ladies, some young Lighthouse girls, we were the rowdy table when we went.
It was great. It was so good.
It was really fun. But we loved hearing the stories of the women standing up and saying, I never thought that I would never thought I would have to come to a food bank,
right?
Where they had something happen, like a COVID crisis, something that nobody can ever plan for. And then this door was wide open for them to receive, and they felt honored. They did not feel degraded. They felt loved and seen and met. And that has this ripple effect of good all across our community.
I think one of the things that I'm always reminded about is that people sometimes have a misconception about who comes to a food bank. And they always think, well, it's just the homeless people lining up like they do outside Rescue Mission or whatever. But that's not who we see. We see working families, a lot of working families, because minimum wage is not enough to live on. And so, again, if you have the choice between paying your rent or buying food, you should pay your rent because we can provide food. I don't have rental assistance. Money, but it's such a misconception about who uses food banks, and it's like the elderly, the young, one of the things that really struck me when this whole crisis first started was the restaurant workers that were coming because, suddenly they were unemployed.
Yeah, immediately.
And they had no backup plan.
Yeah,
and a lot of the restaurant workers were either married or whatever together, and so then they were like both unemployed with no backup plan. And this one young couple came and they had to be like in their early 20s. And, they came and it started snowing like crazy. And they had walked from the bus stop because they didn't have a car because they had lived in the neighborhood where the restaurant was they worked. And they had come all the way down and no coats, no nothing, blizzard. And so we collect coats all throughout the year so we can give them away in the winter. And we just were like, here's food for you. And we had like this huge cartload of food. And they're like, but we're on the bus. We said, well, we'll put it in bags. We have a cart we can loan you, whatever. And they're like, but you guys need coats. And so we gave this guy probably a $200 or $300 Carhartt jacket.
Oh my gosh.
Because he had no coat, but somebody had donated that, which was amazing.
Cool.
We got a long coat for her and, and they were like, this is too much. This is too much food. This, you're going to not give something to somebody else because we're taking all this. And we're like, oh no, we've got this.
Yeah.
We have enough food that we can help you and make sure you're going to survive
Freely,
while you figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
I love that. But they were already so skinny that they didn't need to get any skinnier on our watch.
Let me pump you with these potatoes. A whole bag of potatoes.
Go eat this, and here's some sour cream.
I love that. Well, I love that even if you guys can't actively proclaim that all over your website, that at the heart of what you're doing is to love people like Jesus does and to be active in gospel work and meeting needs, which I think is really beautiful. But much like Jesus's life and his life of service, there was a lot of beautiful moments and things to celebrate, but also a lot of challenges that came. And so I'm just curious if there's anything that stands out to you as like really big moment of celebration or just joy that you've experienced working in service and or one of challenge that has been just another picture of God's goodness through challenge.
I think there's always little awards every day, I mean, of course, a big thing for us in this past year was being able to purchase our building so that when this happened, I didn't have to worry about, am I going to lose my building? I sound so possessive, my building. It's my building.
You put a lot of hours in that building.
I've been there a lot, so it feels like my building, my home away from home. But there's always challenges in knowing, are we going to have enough to make it through till Thursday when we, are closed for 3-day weekend? Are we going to have enough volunteers? Those kind of things. Are we going to have enough financial resources, to make it so I can pay my mortgage, because we still have other bills. Right. We don't live for free there, and like I used to say all the time, I said, I cannot throw a potato at the Xcel Energy and say, here, this is my Xcel Energy bill for this month, So, there's always still those financial needs that an agency like us has.
Yeah.
We run lean and mean. We basically have 3 part-time staff, and part-time in nonprofit, as you well know, is like only 60 hours a week.
Very full-time.
So, So in other jobs, I don't know what it is, but in nonprofit, it's 60 hours a week is part-time with no benefits, but like we did celebrate our 50th anniversary 2 years ago, and to think that for 50 years we've been able to carry on, and there were some pretty rough times through there.
Yeah, I bet.
Thankfully not on my watch, when things went really bad for the agency because of mismanagement of funds or whatever. But, so those were some really rough times where it's like, did they know if they could go on? And people, church partners stepped in and said, this is important, we need to step in.
Yeah.
And, some of those were real transitional, like in the early 90s, there was a huge financial, I don't know what went on. It was before my time, but St. Andrew's down the street from here, Presbyterian, they ended up opening their doors and saying, bring your food bank here, for 2 or 3 months while you figure out what's going on. and they ended up being there 10 years.
Wow.
Before they came over to where we are now.
Wow.
And it was that kind of graciousness, that allowed community ministry to survive for 50 years, which is pretty incredible in the nonprofit world to do that,
Absolutely.
So one of my goals is to make sure that it lasts another 50 years. Yeah. So I need to come up with some kind of a transition plan for that.
Awesome.
But
I love that.
But right now it's every day is Blur's Day. That's what we say. What's today? It's Blur's Day. We don't know what day of the week it is.
Making it through. I know your team has been working really hard. So as a church who, especially as Lighthouse Church, we're young in a lot of ways, but we definitely know that one of the biggest things that we want to grow in is how we're serving our community. And in particular, we're now in the Denver world. We were in Lakewood for a little bit, but now we get to be in the corner of Denver, and we're claiming Denver as our home and as our mission field, and where Jesus wants us to live as he lived, and to go out and to love and to bless people and to meet people and pray and provide things. And so we really want to see an increase in how this season, we've talked a lot over on the ShapeCast, like how do we want to see our church respond once we get back to a new normal? And we want to see fire in people's relationship with Jesus. We want to see hunger to serve people and love. Like, we just want to see a newness kind of rise up. And we're recording this on a Monday. So yesterday was Pentecost Sunday. Yes. And just the reality of when the Holy Spirit comes, like he moves us to action and he moves us to love. And so I would love to just give you a platform to speak on how people of Lighthouse Church and just people of churches across our city can partner with you. Like, what are the highest needs that we can be creatively stepping into for CM?
So right now, there are some volunteer opportunities that we need help with. We have them on our website. So I don't know if you'll publish that website later, but like right now, we have some clothing distributions coming up. The way our clothing bank was set up, there's really not a way to social distance and be in that room. So we are doing these outside clothing distributions, and you were a part of our last one. So it was so successful that we thought we'd just do one a month.
Good.
Until school starts, and then we'll refigure it out again. So our next one is on June 16.
Okay, great.
We're going to start at 9:30 in the morning to 11:30 and distribute out to anyone that comes that needs kids' clothing. Cool. So that means I need people there by 8 in the morning to set up tents and tables and bring out all the clothing, and then to stay until like 1 until we're ready for the food bank that afternoon, because it's on a Tuesday. Okay. And on Tuesdays we work in the afternoon. So there's 3 dates this summer: June 16, July 14, and August 11. Okay. And those are on our website under volunteer opportunities. We also have 2 gardens that we harvest. One at this guy named Ralph. It's at his house.
I love that. Good old Ralph.
They're at Ralph's house, and also at Christ the King Lutheran. We have gardens there. Now that we can't have as many volunteers because they have the whole protocol for social distancing in a garden, which, you would think being outside you wouldn't need to do that.
I know. But that's interesting.
But you have to. Anyway, everybody has to have that thing. The other opportunity that I didn't write on here was we manage a warehouse for a lot of different food pantries called Fern. And
right up the road from you guys. It's super
just
close.
down on Zunai.
Yeah.
So in the past, the Stamp Out Hunger food drive has happened on May, the day before Mother's Day. Okay. And this year they weren't able to have it because of the pandemic. And so now, because of that, we have no canned food there. And what has come in has not been sorted.
Gotcha.
So I'll probably, it'd be easier for people just to email me and say we're interested in helping, like just a small group. I only need less than 10 because there's not that much to do there, but it needs to get done. Yep. And if I do it, it takes me forever by myself.
I remember it. That was where I lost my key.
Yes, in the bottom of a bin. It was like one of the last ones we ever unpacked. But
so I remember our home group did one of those, and I really wanted to. I was actually having a conversation with some people from some of our home groups just the other night, and I really wanted to, just as the pastor of spiritual formation and somebody who loves you guys, people in home groups, people in the community of our church, I want to challenge you guys as members. We typically take a break from our home groups in the summer, but that does not mean that we take a break from community. That does not mean that we take a break from service. We do that to give a breathing space for those that we're leading all year long, just so that we don't have leadership burnout. But I really want to challenge, as you guys are listening to Joyce, and I'm going to be able to send you guys some information, that a great way to bond together with community is to serve our city together. And we have an intergenerational home group. So we had a little kiddo with us. We had older people with us. We had our young generation from our home group come and help sort food. And there's something about having a common goal to just bless our city, even though it's monotonous work. And it's monotonous work.
Yeah.
But I really want to just challenge our church, like to take that seriously, to not wait on a leader to prompt your home group. But if you guys are a part of a home group, to gather the people in your home group and say, hey, this is something that I want to do with you. Will you guys sign up with me? Because it's very easy to do online. So as you're hearing these opportunities, I just want to encourage you guys to think about how you can step in on them and not wait for them to be provided perfectly to you. I really want us to see like a rise up in our church, just taking action. And while we will do all that we can to provide those opportunities and to remind you and to create those spaces, I really just want to prompt us as people who have been hungry for community for a long time that this is a great way to do it whenever we can, whenever that will be.
So like with the Fern Food Bank sorting food thing, that would be more of a contact me and say that I have a group of 4 or 5 or 6. And then let me know that they can come.
Cool.
Because then I will work around their schedule.
Sweet.
That'd just be easier because I have to work around other people. Like Colorado Feeding Kids has groups in there that are packing prepackaged meals that we use for our homeless people.
Cool.
So I have to work around their schedule, and they're there 2 or 3 days a week in the morning with 10 people here and 10 people there. And then there's other agencies that use the Fern warehouse.
Okay.
So yeah, we just have to work around that. And evenings are fine.
Okay, great. Awesome.
But be prepared to sweat because there's not air conditioning in that building. You know?
All the more fun it makes for a memory, which is awesome.
But all the other opportunities are on our website. And, you know, if there's some people that are bilingual that would like to step up and help, I might be losing one of my bilingual greeters soon because she's signed up to work for the census.
Okay.
And that when they kick that in, then she's gone and I need help.
Okay.
Like there's a couple people right now that I really want to acknowledge from Lighthouse that are helping regularly. One is Levi Del Rio.
Oh, cool.
He has been
He's amazing.
there every single day since he came for Clothing Bank.
Cool.
You know, and it's so nice to have a young person with a lot of muscle, especially today when I think we unloaded close to 2,000 or 3,000 pounds worth of food.
Holy cow.
You know, and I'm one of the older ones there right now, but you know, it's just a lot of food.
It is.
2,000 or 3,000 pounds is a lot of food. So he's been there, and it's like he can carry the 80-pound box of meat in the building where, you know, I can do 60, but not 80. That's like pushing me over the edge. So he's been volunteering every day. And then Angela Diedrich also has been volunteering, translating, and doing our being a greeter and greeting the people that do come to our door. The way our food bank works now is you actually can't come in the building. So they come and they greet them over the railing, hopefully under a tent so it's not so hot. Today it was kind of a roaster. And then we push a cart of groceries down our ramp to the people. Awesome. So she's been doing that 2 days a week.
Sweet.
And that has really helped out a lot, you know, and all we did was say, I need a bilingual greeter. And she's like, I can speak, like she can speak like 4 or 5 languages.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
I know.
So,
and
she's so pleasant and, you know, and doesn't let the people ruffle her when they come. And you really need that. You know, because people are coming from places of hurt.
Totally.
And so you don't know if they're going to be angry because they're so frustrated and they're so hot. And, you know, what if you can't give them everything they want?
Right.
You know, and so having that sensitivity to understand that people are coming to you from a place of hurt.
Yeah.
And that they don't want to have to be there asking for food.
Right.
You know, especially families, they don't want to have to know that they can't provide for their children
kids,
right now. And that's just super hard.
Yeah.
Super hard.
Yeah,
for families.
it's not just they're coming to receive something physical, but there's so much more emotional components happening behind the scenes and under the surface. So those are really great tangible ways for people to jump in. And like I said, I really hope to see that really grow and continue to grow from our congregation. But how can we also be just praying for you guys? Because we want to hold those both in tandem.
Well, always pray that we don't get sick from somebody. You know, so far we have been very, very fortunate that none of us has gotten sick. Of course, we haven't had our older volunteers coming in. So we're running lean and mean with maybe 5 volunteers a day, which is exhausting.
Yeah.
But we can't really have that many more people in the building because then we'd fall all over each other, you know, in the way we run it now. So, you know, pray for our health. Pray that we will continue to get the financial resources we need. Thankfully, there have been some amazing grants that have come through. One recently from Food Bank of the Rockies that they, you always see people collecting money for Food Bank of the Rockies, and you probably wonder, well, where does that go? Yeah. Well, thankfully, some of it came our way. They gave us a $4,000 grant to buy food.
Awesome.
Like a credit.
Yep. Cool.
And I spent about $6,000 instead of just $4,000 because that was what we needed.
Yeah.
It is so much more expensive to run a drive-through food pantry than it is self-choice.
Oh, really?
Because you don't know what the people want to eat. So you have to give a very large variety of food.
Okay.
When it's self-choice and they're choosing,
have, like,
I want
leftovers
this,
and
I
stuff.
don't want that, then you can really, your food goes a lot further in self-choice than it does when you're like saying, okay, I think that you probably need to eat squash, lettuce, tomatoes, onions, oranges. I hope you like this, here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's much more expensive to do it that way.
Yeah.
But also these grants have come through that we've been able to do that. But
Very
I have
cool.
never spent so much money in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
I think I've spent probably $7,000 to $8,000 in the past 2 months, which would
Really?
usually in the past have been my entire year's budget.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big uptick.
It's huge.
Yeah. Okay.
It's huge. And the longer this goes on, it's just going to keep being there
Yeah. Yeah.
for us. But
Absolutely. We'll
one
pray for that.
another cool thing that's happened is Meadow Gold Dairies has revamped the way they do their almost out of date food distribution.
Okay.
And so we partnered with Catholic Charities, and then now we pick up milk twice a week.
Oh, good.
Which before I was buying like 100 cases of milk for $200.
Okay.
Now I can get 20 cases of milk for free.
Oh, sweet.
Which is amazing. And I
Yeah.
don't know how long that will last.
Right. But take it while
But right
you can.
now we're
Using
like,
it.
thank you
Yeah.
for doing this for us. And they're like, well, we're just glad that it's not being dumped,
Yeah.
and that we have agencies that are willing to take it. So it's more work on our end because we have to go down to the dairy and pick it up and then, get it in the coolers
Organize it,
and
yeah.
wherever. But
it is worth it.
it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because now I know that every family's getting milk, every family's getting meat, every family's getting eggs, that comes through our place.
That's so awesome. With that, just as kind of on an ending note, have you seen an increase in service from other industries in this season? So typically people talk about, hey, we're hitting like a rough spot in our country in a lot of ways, in our nation, in our world. And sometimes when we have the hardest seasons, humanity can rise up and be willing to help and be willing to serve. Have you seen more companies like that who are saying, hey, in this high needs season, we will help all the more? Have you seen a lot of that?
I've seen more of it from individuals.
Okay.
Some of the grantors have said, yes, we know you have a need. We're going to up your grant that you wrote, and there's been more grants available. Some businesses have taken on the challenge of saying, let's try and raise the like with this one company, they said, let's raise $500 this month so that they can purchase extra food, and they raised $1,000. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But not so much from companies as from individuals.
personal
We
level.
have had more. I thought I'd seen a lot of new individual donors when we did our capital campaign, but I have seen more new individual
God.
donors than I have ever seen before.
So good.
And so every night I'm writing thank you notes
Cool.
because, they wouldn't have to give.
Right.
Or they'll give from their stimulus check, and that has been pretty touching. It's like,
Yeah.
I didn't need my stimulus check. Here it is. Here's
Yeah.
here's $1,200 for you. And you're just like, what?
What a gift.
Yeah,
Cool.
$1,200. Here's my retirement.
Yeah.
My retirement fund, whatever
Yeah.
it is. So that has been really incredible
Cool.
to see, and it's been individuals who see a need, and so they want to fulfill a need. They want to feel like they're making an impact, and they are.
Yeah.
They really are making an impact.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I just really hope that just on behalf of Lighthouse Church and leadership, that we admire how much you are on the front lines of change and service in our community. So thank you for all that you do and that community ministry does. And I hope this, like I said in the beginning, hope this encourages you guys and challenges you guys in a really positive way, that this is a season that we can have positive change on behalf of the gospel, moving on behalf of Jesus and what we believe he'd be doing if he were walking amongst us. And that's our call right now. And so yeah, so I will be posting some information on the link with this video so that you guys can check out their website and continue getting in contact with Joyce and letting her know that we're here to support what's happening with community ministry and how they're serving our city. But to wrap up, I would just love to pray over you. Is that okay? Okay. King Jesus, I want to thank you that you are a God of peace, that you are a God of service, and that you're also the sovereign God that had a beautiful plan for Joyce's life, that in every turn of her life, Lord, you had an intent and a purpose. And I thank you, God, that she glorifies you in that. I thank you, God, that she sees that you are faithful and good. And Lord, I praise you that she is so full of your spirit, Lord, that she serves your people relentlessly, Lord, and constantly. God, that you have gifted her with such a strength and an urgency to meet need in this city. And so, Lord, we at Lighthouse Church are just grateful for her heart. We're grateful for her faith, Jesus. And we ask that you would continue to meet the needs of community ministry in this season, that you would provide the finances through those generous donors and people who are just being moved by your spirit and moved by this season. Jesus, and we also ask that you'd provide volunteers, that there'd be an uptick and an uprising of people willing and eager to give of their time and their strength, God, and that we would see more of your kingdom come through service and utilizing our hands for your work, God. And so we pray your blessing over community ministry, and I want to pray your blessing over Joyce, Lord, that you'd give her rest from her work, that you would rejuvenate her, and that you would remind her that she is seen and loved and so greatly valued in our community, Jesus. So we lift her up to you. We thank you for this time, and we pray these things in your mighty name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Yep. Bye, guys. We'll talk to you soon.